Oh boy, this was a fun one to watch. I know I've spent a lot of these Season 3 missing episode reviews complaining about websites such as Dailymotion and how bad they are for accessibility, but at least so far, there's always been a consistent way to watch each serial, the Daleks' Master Plan notwithstanding. But in this case, I think I counted about 6 or 7 various versions of watching this serial, yet none of them were complete. I had to watch parts 1 and 2 in that fan animation style that I watched the last few Lost episodes in. Part 3 was the loose cannon telesnap reconstruction, and then part 4 was this crusty, crappy, just awful recon made by who knows who. Well, at least I got the cliche rant over and done with now, so I can just move on to looking at what is otherwise a really enjoyable adventure. The Savages is the final Lost serial of Season 3, coming in at 4 episodes from 1966. I did enjoy the little teaser for this story at the end of the last episode of The Gunfighters, where after the TARDIS materialise, the Doctor exclaims that they've arrived in the most sophisticated and civilised society in the universe, before immediately cutting to a couple of scruffy cavemen hiding in a bush. It works as quite a good setup, giving you a rough idea that everything is not all that it seems. For a race of super advanced, highly intelligent people, how do you explain these savages? Well, we're quickly shown the dastardly experiments that the elders of this so-called civilized society use to not only separate the classes, but also live off their energy as well. You see, they are committing these heinous experiments on these savages, essentially draining them of their life force, not only to rejuvenate themselves, but also to absorb their strengths and talents of the victims, so like engineering and artistry. Oh my gosh, I've literally just realised it now while recording, but it's almost identical to the Monstars basketball from the first Space Jam movie, how they would absorb the talents of all the basketball players. What do you mean you haven't seen Space Jam? So, it's up to the Doctor, Stephen and Dodo to save the day, if, that is, they can avoid being captured and subjected to the same fate themselves. I really enjoyed this one. I know what I'm about to say probably sounds dumb, but I guess the title just didn't give me anything to get excited about. I suppose I was probably worried we'd get more primitive cavemen from the incredibly basic first ever serial, An Unearthly Child. But instead we got a pretty neat sci-fi romp. I'll say now, as much as I want to give this one a recommendation, this has been the hardest serial to watch so far, simply because of the inconsistency and methods of watching it, if that makes sense. Say what you will about Dailymotion, and believe me, I certainly have, at least you can almost always find a full set of episodes in the same style. This one was a pain to find, unless you want to settle with the worst possible version full of static and with half the screen cut off, but at that point, why bother? Unfortunately, that is the only way I could watch part 4, so... There were quite a few small details I noticed. For instance, despite being short-lived, I appreciated seeing the Doctor be able to have a pleasant exchange, for a change, with the elders of the society who had somehow managed to charter and plot out his journey through time and space and actually anticipate his arrival? That's insane. I really liked it when a character absorbs some of the Doctor's life energy, minor spoiler, and almost perfectly mimics the Doctor. Aside from it being a completely different voice, it is such an accurate impersonation of William Hartnell's vocal inflections. There's a New Zealand actor in this serial as a very minor character. Not particularly exciting, but as a fellow Kiwi myself, I felt it worth mentioning. Despite having a reasonably simple name, I get the feeling no matter how I try and pronounce it, I'll end up saying it wrong. The actor returns later in Doctor Who in a 4th Doctor story, so hopefully by then I'll learn to say it correctly. And the last 2 things I noticed, heads up, we're going to go into some philosophical discussions here. Yeah, I know, the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve is the one that people write studies on, and yeah, I completely ignored that. Now here I am about to do a deep dive into the Savages. Despite the objective wrongdoing that these elders were doing, I don't think they were all the way evil or being deliberately malicious. Perhaps just blinded by tradition, otherwise they could just as easily have absorbed all the life force from the savages, just killing them all in the process. And when you think of the parallels to our real-world animal agriculture industry, and all the despicable and evil things humans inflict to living, sentient creatures, most don't view it as evil, just a necessity or some rubbish like that, it's the way it's always been. Perhaps this super advanced race of people aren't as advanced as they think they are. Much like us. Actually, you know what? It's never explicitly stated, but this has to be Earth, right? These have to be humans. Oh, look at us. We are the self-proclaimed smartest, most sophisticated civilization in the universe with technology light years ahead of our time. So much so that we can pinpoint and charter the course of an individual time traveler through space and time to the point where we can predict his arrival. But our ancestors ate meat, so I've got to have me chicken nuggies. Oh, you're still here. Thank you. Finally, small thing, I promise. There's these two very minor side characters that basically only appear at the very start of the serial, and long story short, something happens, and they're told, wait here, the guards will arrive soon to punish you. And they're visibly scared, and talk about how afraid they are of their impending punishment, and then they just disappear from the story, never to be seen again. Rest in peace, those two, I guess. Alright, and now we come to the only real spoiler of this review that is pretty significant to the overarching Doctor Who timeline. This is the final appearance of Peter Purves as Stephen Taylor. When all was said and done in the events of the Savages, the two opposing sides want to quit the conflict and join together to create peace. But they need a mediator, and they request the assistance of the Doctor, but, you know, he can hardly stop travelling in the TARDIS and get an actual job, so he nominates the help of Stephen, who, in his opinion, is the best option. Well, it's not going to be the teenage Dodo, is it? At the moment, it did seem a bit like the Doctor was like chucking him away, throwing him under the bus, but I'm pretty sure it was meant to be like a genuine moment of admiration. With a respectful handshake to the Doctor and a hug to Dodo, Stephen departs for his new life, bringing peace to an unjust world. In the end, I quite liked Stephen. To start with, I was worried he was going to be a carbon copy replacement of Ian, but he held his own. Sure, he would bicker and go against the Doctor occasionally, but it always seemed to come from a place of respect, whereas both him and Ian would always have some kind of moral high ground to the Doctor. He always cared for Vicky, Katerina, Sarah, and Dodo, more so than the Doctor, probably. So long, Stephen. Best of luck to you. Although I'm not sure why we never saw his panda mascot again. Dude literally ran into a burning building to save her. Under attack from Daleks, mind you, but I guess it just belongs to the TARDIS now. And that's it. Another good Doctor Who story, which, like I said, I can't really recommend watching because of how difficult it is to get a hold of. It's probably most remembered for being Stephen's last episode, but fun, useless fact for you. It's also the first Doctor Who serial to no longer need individual episode titles, a trend that would continue throughout the remainder of the series. It must have been hard to come up with names for each episode individually, instead of just settling for, you know, part 1, part 2, etc. For what it's worth, I think this one is ripe with potential for an official BBC animation DVD. Fairly simple sets, not too much action. They could have fun playing with the lights because of the light beam torch gun thingies. Come on, BBC, get your act together and please don't cancel official reconstructions. I don't want to have to watch Dailymotion forever. Well, that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching, and please feel free to check back in next week while I take a look at the final serial of Season 3, The War Machines. Fun fact, this is the only other William Hartnell story I've ever seen aside from the Daleks, so it'll be fun.